Hello, and welcome to the Come to Your Senses podcast. I'm your host, embodiment-based coach, Mary Lofgren. Here, we explore how to live bravely and beautifully through a lifestyle of embodiment. You'll hear gems to empower you around mindset, mindfulness, somatic psychology, and neuroscience, as well as beauty, food, style, and the art of slow living to meet your soul through the senses. I am so happy that you're here. Let's begin. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the podcast. So today we are diving into a topic that is really at the locus of the work of embodiment, which is trusting your intuition. Intuition is this mystical, sometimes magical knowing that can show up as a clawing from inside your bones. Sometimes it can show up as a whisper or a tug in the belly. Sometimes it shows up as a Saint Bernard sitting on your chest, really trying to get your attention. And Carl Jung defined intuition as perception via the unconscious. Intuition is deeply interwoven with embodiment because it's not something you see, it is something you sense from a different level of consciousness. So however you relate to your intuition, in today's episode, I'm going to share with you some of the most glittering jewels that I have come across on my path to relate to my intuition as a friend and as a companion, as well as some practical ways that you can begin tending this relationship and developing the muscle of your intuition in ways that feel safe and that feel curious, rather than waiting for moments that feel really loaded. And so where we're going to begin is where we always begin in this podcast, which is with the body. In my experience of coaching, the main reason that people come to me for coaching is because they are aware that there is a deeper expression of their, I hate this term, I'm sure you do too, but their most authentic self. That most authentic self is a bit of a slippery minx in today's day and age, and it can sound a little cheesy, but that's the honest truth, is that whenever I do a coaching consultation, there is a golden thread that unites each of my clients' needs and desires, which is being able to know what it feels like to live without lying. In other words, where their insides and the calls and the cravings and the yearnings and that most sacred, most beautiful pearl that we sometimes call the authentic self gets to live and be made visible and known on the outside. And embodiment coaching is one of the ways that we do this, because in the body there are what I consider to be four main centers for our intuition. And these are, in embodied intelligence coaching, the four main centers of intelligence. So there is the wisdom of the mind, which is our cognitive wisdom, our thoughts. There is the wisdom of the heart, our emotions. The wisdom of the gut, our instinctual body. And the wisdom of the pelvis and all of the organs inside and outside the pelvis, which contain a certain quality of sensual intelligence. And then there is a fifth quality of intelligence, which is what I would describe as your being. So you may have had an experience of dissonance when your heart is telling you one thing and your head is telling you another. And maybe your gut is telling you something different still. And each of these has their own unique superpowers. And in my own research of living a life that is an expression of my intuition. I have tried living from one of these individual centers. So for the first 20 some years of my life, I lived just pretty much only from my head. For the next 10 or so years, I pretty much lived only from my pelvis, which was really fun. At Mama Gina's School of Womanly Arts, where I was a student and then became the enrollment director for a couple of years. It was literally my job to study pleasure as a lifestyle and to truly research what it's like to make pleasure the defining quality of my life. And I'm so, so grateful for that time and for all of that research that I did. But just like everything, there's a shadow side to that. And then I felt that, just living from my pelvis, and at Mama Gina's, we would use a different word for pelvis, and to maintain my non-explicit status here on the podcast, I'll just say it rhymes with cushy. And that was really, really fun and really great information. But I also felt that living just from that one center of intelligence really kind of isolated me from my heart. So then I, created my whole life based on just really living from my heart. And I think probably the defining experience of that was my journey with sobriety and getting sober in different areas of my life. And so you can see that in one's life path and the study of intuition, there are times where it is really valuable to make one of these intelligence centers your primary area of study. However, I believe that trying to live by just the intelligence of one part of your system is not a complete picture. And that's why my coaching program is called Embodied Intelligence, because it is the study of each of these intelligence centers, as well as the union of these intelligence centers, which is what I would describe as your being, your intuition embodied, and your most potent creative expression personified. I think about the women in the movie Advanced Style, which if you've never seen it, run, don't walk. It's about these incredible women who live in Manhattan, and Ari Seth Cohen walks around the streets photographing them. You see these women when you live in New York who are just like insanely, eccentrically, gorgeously stylish. And it's a kind of style that comes from really, really knowing yourself and really, really trusting your wildness. And in the context of the topic du jour, intuition by its very nature is wild. And you may have had the experience, as I have many, many times in my life, of knowing something that your mind couldn't comprehend, feeling it in your bones, seeing subtleties that aren't visible to the naked eye, and really kind of operating in this animus, instinctual, intuitive experience. And then the mind comes in and says, "You're crazy, you're too sensitive." The mind, which in its natural form is wildly brilliant and serves our intuition, but when conditioned to fear the body and fear the intuition, will work to obey the conditioning it's received and gaslight us from within. And then SH hits the fan and you say, "I knew it! I knew I should have trusted myself. Why did I go against my gut?" And often it's because trusting your gut means trusting the most frightening option, the wildest option, the option you have been taught is the most untrustworthy. And so what I'd like to share with you now are some really simple tools and techniques that you can play with in order to befriend your intuition and start to develop a deeper sense of your intuition and of that circuitry in your own body. So the first is courtesy of my good friend Rochelle Sheik, who is the founder of Koya, a movement system that is central to my work and is all about locating and trusting the sensation of truth in your body. And I think of all the things I've done, Koya has been the most impactful in learning how to trust my body and trust my intuition. And so I'll pop Koya in the show notes. But Rochelle shared with me many years ago that one of the ways we can develop our intuition is by going on an intuition walk. And when I lived in Brooklyn, I lived just a block away from the Brooklyn Botanical Garden. And in the morning, before I would go off to my job to study pleasure, I would go over to the Botanical Garden, and they have all these beautiful winding paths. And I would come to the lilac bushes, and going left, I would experience the waft of lilac, and going right, I would go into this little foresty, mulchy section. And I would pause and I would check in with my body. Which direction do I want to go in today? Now, hearing that, if I were listening to this podcast, I would say, oh, girl, go on the lilac path. I mean, lilac is one of my favorite fragrances in the world. And yet, at times, I would pause in that moment and feel more drawn to the mulchy path. And then at times, I would say to myself, this isn't working. I don't feel anything. And that was probably the most useful aspect of this exercise, because what it taught me is that intuition is not exactly like finding the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Really, what trusting our intuition does is it just offers us more information. And that's not to say that I don't believe in trusting our intuition and that I haven't based my entire life's work on trusting our intuition. But sometimes I think that there can be a quality of fantasy involved in trusting one's intuition, that if I just trust my gut for real once and for all, that will be the right choice. And when there's a right and wrong, it offers us the illusion that we will be able to control the outcome of whatever is happening. For example, I felt super drawn to come out to Phoenix, Arizona to live here. And all these things lined up, like the place I was going to live and just everything I wanted. It was like I trusted my gut so deeply and I felt so led. And I'm here and I have some wonderful new friends. And it's lovely here. And nothing spectacular has really gone down. It's not like, I have arrived at the X on the treasure map of my wildest dreams. It's like, okay, yeah, great city. I could start over here if I wanted to. I'm not exactly sure that I want to. But the true reward that I've received is that I am chipping away at potential layers of future regret. And that to me is the reward that we can count on when we trust our intuition. A therapist said to me once when I was having some anxiousness about a relationship, and she said, I can't tell you what to do. I don't want to tell you what to do, but I will say that I only ever regret not trusting my gut instinct. I don't ever regret when I trusted it. Even if it failed, it was a success because I trusted myself. And that has stuck with me so deeply. And I had an experience this summer where I was at a camp-like kind of thing. And I had a roommate, and a friend asked me to be her roommate. And I love this friend. And I thought, hell yes, I want to move in with this friend. And then I started packing up my stuff, and something told me, don't do it. This doesn't feel right. Don't do it. And I argued with this part of myself for a long time because it was so clear that this is what I wanted. And yet I had this voice. And a day goes by and I tell my friend, I don't know what's going on, but my intuition is telling me not to. And she's like, okay, cool, I get it. And then the next day, I change my mind. I get a gut feeling that I do want to move in with this person. And I did, and I put all my stuff in there. And then there was a hiccup, and there was a bit of miscommunication, and someone's feelings got hurt. And this might seem like I'm going off on a tangent, but the value of this story is that if I had bypassed my intuitive voice that first time, and then this miscommunication happened, I knew this was going to happen. I trusted myself. I had a gut instinct not to come here. But because I took that sacred pause and I listened, and then when the answer changed, I listened then too, it was smooth sailing for me around resolving this conflict because I had trusted myself the whole way. So I was in agreement with whatever came. And to me, while that may not be the pot of gold where I never have to feel pain or discomfort or vulnerability again, that more fantasy kind of pot of gold, to me, that is a worthy reward for trusting myself. So that first exercise, you can do an intuition walk, you can do an intuition drive, you can do an intuition grocery shop where you just set aside 5, 10, 15 minutes to really improve the quality of intimacy that you have with your intuition, where there's no agenda. It's not about getting it right or getting it wrong, but it's simply about being curious about that nudge and about that kind of intelligence that operates in the river below thought. The next jewel is to refine your understanding of the difference between intuition and impulse. Right now I'm reading the book Intuitive Eating, and they talk a lot about how there's this consciousness that without diets and food plans and nutrition plans, people will just go into this food eating orgy and just, that's the most common response that they talk about in the book is like, if I give up the structure that I've based my entire relationship to food on for my entire life, the borders of the river will run over and we will have a disaster on our hands. And one of my favorite quotes about the instinctual body and the behaviors that result from this disconnection with the instinctual body is that the opposite of dysfunctional behavior is often just more dysfunctional behavior. In other words, the opposite of restriction is not overconsumption. It is a healthy, intuitive relationship to one's appetite. This week, I'm teaching a free class called The Secret Pleasures of Committing to a Goal, schoolofsensualliving.com/free, if you'd like to join us and sign up. And in the class, we talk about the hyper-masculinization of goal setting and the use of words like slay your goals and kill your goals and no excuses and all that kind of stuff. And how the logical response is to go into a hyper-feminization. I don't love using gendered terms here, but this energy that we sometimes call masculine and feminine, the feminine being that more withdrawn, relaxed magnetism style of creation. And that when we're in that hyper-feminization of approaching goals, it's like passive and dissociated. And that swinging the pendulum to the farthest reach of either side is not right or wrong. It's simply not using and utilizing the fullest superpowers at our disposal, which is allowing these two energies to become a third energy, which is the merging of intuition and effort, depth and drive, imagination and action. And so when it comes to intuition and impulse, sometimes they can seem very, very similar. And this is a very personal discovery. It's not really something that I can advise anyone on because the voice of everyone's intuition and impulse are different. But I'll tell you what's true for mine is that intuition often speaks softer and lower, whereas impulse speaks higher and faster. Impulse is kind of like the kid at the front of the classroom who answers every question and has a lot to prove. Intuition is a bit more like the kid at the back of the classroom who knows all the answers but is in no rush to prove it. And where it lands in my body personally is that impulse kind of feels like I feel it in between my eyebrows and my heart starts to beat up or speed up. And it's almost like someone has put their hands over my eyes and is saying, just do it. Just hurry up and do it. Don't pay attention. Whereas intuition is this voice that emerges in the quiet moments. And not necessarily always the quiet moments. A lot of times exercise helps me connect to my intuition. Moving my body in any way really helps me connect to my intuition. But the voice of my intuition comes from deep inside and sounds a little bit more like the sophisticated, deep intellectual art school college student than the insecure, grasping for popularity, willing to sacrifice their own boundaries to be liked high school student, if you catch my drift. And so this too, much like the intuition walk, is very much a practice. And in your own study of your inner dialogue, perhaps it may be helpful to assign characters and outfits to the voices inside your head, because it's been very helpful for me. The final jewel that I want to offer you is a way of embodying the messages of your intuition. When I was deciding whether or not I wanted to take a yoga teacher training, and my friend Mo, who is a coach, advised me to set a timer and to walk around my house saying over and over, I am taking this teacher training. I am doing it, and really describing the whole thing and doing so with conviction and seeing how that felt in my body. And then I stopped the timer and I reset the timer and I walked around and I said the opposite. I am not doing this teacher training. I'm not doing it now. I'm not paying the money. I'm not doing it with this studio. And I noticed how it felt in my body. And this is something that we do in Koya classes also. It's called a contrast dance, where sometimes the most valuable way to study something is to study its opposite. And so we arrive on a yoga mat, and on one side of the yoga mat, let's say the theme of the class is expansion. And so on one side of the yoga mat, you'll play a song and we'll move in the body. What does it feel like to be closed off? What does it feel like in your body? What does that opposite of expansion feel like? And then once you have that somatic understanding, moving to the other side of the mat, and what does it feel like to be fully expansive? And just really studying these two somatic states. And then moving towards the middle, and what does it feel like to have a foot in the human experience of being closed off and being expansive. And this is something that I have done with every big decision I have ever made, is this contrast dance of on one side is one aspect of the decision, on another side is the other. Because once again, intuition is not a cognitive thing. Intuition is a sense. It is a knowing. It is a quickening. And so the fastest way that we can connect to it is by speaking in the language that is its origin, which is the language of sensing into the body. And then one little bonus I just want to slide in is something as you begin to develop your relationship with your intuition, something that you may notice is that you get these little whispers that seem so inconsequential, like, don't throw out that receipt, or don't close the trunk yet. Go make sure the keys are still in the ignition, whatever it is. That don't make any sense to the cognitive mind. And my suggestion is it does not matter. Trust it. I believe that trusting these small, seemingly inconsequential nudges is a sign of deep respect for that intuitive voice, and that when we trust these smaller nudges, it becomes easier to trust and have contact with our intuition around the bigger things. And so that brings us to the end of today's episode. I do want to say that if you're listening to this on the day that it is released, tomorrow, January 19th, I am teaching a free class called The Secret Pleasures of Committing to a Goal. And you can find all the details for that at schoolofsensualliving.com/free. It will be recorded if you're not able to make it live. And that at the end of this month, I will be closing out my coaching program, Embodied Intelligent, and I have a few spots left to work with clients in 2022. So if you would like more information about that, you can go to schoolofsensualliving.com/coaching and read all about it, my friends. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a review on iTunes. You have no idea how much your reviews mean to me. I am recording this in my dear friend Shannon's closet. We had a couple good runs at the podcast studio, but just got a little pressed for time on today's episode. And so it can sometimes be a little isolating recording these podcasts and sending them out into the world and not really knowing how they impact others. And so your notes on social media and your reviews mean so much to me in these closet moments. Thank you so, so much. And I will see you in the next episode.